How did you get to New York City?
I got to New York City through my love of jazz. Before I moved to New York City, I was doing my bachelor's program at the Royal College of Music in Stockholm. And I was also working at the biggest jazz club in Stockholm. So I would meet a lot of New York musicians multiple times a week. And everyone would say, if you want to do jazz, you got to move to New York. So I applied to the only, at the time, master's program for jazz voice at the Manhattan School of Music. I got in, and then I moved here.
Was coming to New York always of interest to you, or it really was because it was the jazz mecca, which you learned later in life?
I think it was mostly because of the jazz mecca. And I mean, also, like, you've seen so much of all the New York scenes in different movies. So I knew that it was going to be a cool place, and I had visited once before I came here to do the audition. So yeah, it was on my radar, but it definitely became a place I needed to go when I kept hearing it repeatedly that I needed to go there.
Are you a lifelong musician? Was this a part of your life from the time you were young?
I would say so. I remember always singing. So growing up in Thailand, I would sing all the time, especially sitting in traffic in Bangkok. So the way to kill time in cars was just to sing. And we would have these CDs that would just play on and on. So I knew all the vocal parts, but then also all the instrumental parts and solos and all that kind of stuff that was happening. I would just sing along to everything because I was bored. And when I was 9, I started playing classical violin and classical piano. And then from there, it just kind of grew.
Do you have musicians in your family?
Yes and no. So my grandfather, so my mom is Swedish and my dad is Thai. So my Swedish grandfather, he was actually a silent movie pianist.
Wow.
He was born in 1907.
Wow.
But then when he got my mom and my aunt, then my grandma was like, you need to get a real job. So he stopped, but he played all the instruments. So I think that I got a lot of my musicality from him. And it's kind of been an honor to be able to like follow through his footsteps, because I'm the first person in my family to have music to be my career.
As you mentioned, you're Thai and Swedish. How much of your life did you spend in those two countries?
I spent 11 years in Thailand and 13 years in Sweden.
And I'd love to hear about any interesting, memorable contrast between the two places. I've been to Sweden briefly. I've never been to Thailand. What still resonates about the two countries?
What resonates or what's different?
I guess both.
I think maybe the things that are in common is that at the end of the day, everyone just wants to find purpose in life and be loved and love people. So that is a common theme, I think, in all the different places that I've lived. The biggest differences, I think that maybe the differences are easier to distinguish, would be obviously the Thai food. It's more delicious. And, and there's more spice and just like more like a punch to it, which I love. The tuning system of Thai traditional music is different from Western music. The language is very different. So the way I would like place my vowels in Thai language versus Swedish and then English are very different. And then culturally, it's a very big difference in terms of that Thai people are taught to take care of their family, and you really put your family first. And in Sweden, because of the welfare system, everyone is very, very independent. So there's just a very big kind of cultural and cultural difference.
So you're singing in traffic in Thailand, trying to boredom bust. Did you think from an early age that this could be a thing, a career? Did you get feedback that you were good at this?
Yes and no. Thailand, being an Asian country, loves karaoke.
Stereotypes are true.
Yes. So I would be encouraged all the time to sing karaoke, along with everyone else in my family would do karaoke. So I heard at that time that people thought that I had a good voice, but when I expressed that I wanted to be a singer, it was definitely looked down upon. And my dad, being Asian, he's like, you should get a real job, like being a doctor or being a lawyer. So I would say that it was encouraged to love music, but it wasn't really encouraged to maybe do it as a career because of how unstable it can be.
And it sounds like you were telling me before we started recording that you kind of had this two-pronged path for a while. Mm-hmm. There was the nerdy academic scientific path and then the musical artistic path.
Yes.
What happened?
The music path just kept showing me signs that I could do it and approving me and giving me opportunities. I had this thought of, if I were to choose to be a musician, particularly being a female singer, which is a very physical job, and being a doctor, then I thought that at least if I can be a singer at the beginning of my life, if I wanted to become a doctor later in life, I could do that. And probably, even if I am just an intern at a hospital or I'm a resident in my 60s, and people are going to think that I'm an awesome doctor because I just look old at that point, versus starting a music career later in life is just harder as a female singer.
The physicality as a female singer, I'd love to hear about that.
I think that it's both, like singing is very physical. So we were talking about that too. I'm recovering from ankle surgery, and like oftentimes I always wear a Fitbit, and when I do a show, I can never stand still. So I always like move around to the music, and I can see after a show that I've burned like between 600 and 750 calories. So the amount of like physical energy that goes into being able to move around, engage with the audience, and then also sing in tune without running out of breath is a very physical thing. And then there's the whole like societal pressure too of being a woman. It's just the ageism is harder.
Is there a lot of physical training that you have needed to put yourself through in order to be able to endure the physicality of a 2-hour set, however long you're on stage?
Yes, definitely. And I think that I kind of took it a little bit for granted. I had done some specific like vocal physical training before, training my lats, training my hamstrings, and really getting my abs engaged for singing specifically. My lats were very weak. I didn't even know that lats were like a thing.
Yeah, remind me where that is or what that is.
It's back here.
That's right. Yeah.
So helping with singing, and then what I noticed earlier in my career was that I would sing and perform on stage, and then I wouldn't always be in tune. And I noticed that was because I was jumping around so much. So when I was running out of air, it was just harder for me to sustain my pitch. So I started doing more cardio training in order to be able to like jump around on stage and still sing in tune. So now that I'm recovering from ankle surgery, I'm realizing how much like energy actually goes into just standing for 2 hours. And then you're adding some movement to that, some jumping to that, some excitement to that. And it's actually a lot.
Yeah.
So all the, people on Broadway who are doing 8 shows a week, it's physical.
They're professional athletes.
100%.
So there's the physical component, the physical training. Then and this is also physical, but the voice, your voice. I don't know how people are able to belt these songs out without completely losing their voice in one evening, much less like go on tour and be able to perform. How do you do that? I'd love to hear about how that works.
I mean, I'm sure that you've heard this from other singers, but
a little bit. I know there's voice training that goes into it, but how have you made that work?
I would say that the biggest misconception about singing is that singing comes from the throat and that you're just relying on your vocal cords. If you think about it, like the vocal cords are the size of your thumbnail. They're tiny. So if you're relying on having all the small muscles to support your voice, you are going to damage it, or you're going to break under pressure. You're going to fatigue very quickly. So when you're utilizing your larger muscles of abs and lats, and then your hamstrings and your glute, then you're definitely getting more support. It's kind of like, if you were telling me before that you like to work out, is if you're doing squats or doing deadlifts and stuff in the wrong way and using smaller muscles, like you're trying to use your arms instead of your legs, you're going to fatigue so much quicker.
Yeah.
So it's the same thing with singing, that it really involves your entire body to support the singing.
A full body experience, and that you really need to have the whole system humming at a high level to be able to do that. I mean, I know as an American, there are these legendary stories about Bruce Springsteen and how he's known. He's actually coming to New York next month, which is partly why he's been on my mind, and I'd love to go see him. But he's always been known as this like physical junkie who doesn't drink, doesn't do drugs, and just is a relentless performer for these epic 3-hour sets. And there's probably no way in hell he'd be able to do that if he didn't train like he was in the NBA.
I would agree. And like when I'm on tour, it's the same thing, that I don't drink. I eat very healthily. So I typically don't eat any gluten and dairy, but when I'm on tour, I don't even cheat with a little bit of dairy because it just immediately gives me like a lot of mucus. You can hear it in my voice now. It's a little scratchy because I've just been eating things I shouldn't be eating, and sugar, and caffeine, and just all these things. It really makes a difference.
I'd love to get back to your story about you coming here. So you get into the jazz vocalist program at the Manhattan Institute. What happens? So you graduate, and did you know you wanted to stay here? Did you create opportunities for yourself while you were in school?
Well, it was all a tricky situation because I came here on a student visa, so I was an immigrant. And when you are an immigrant on a student visa, you're not allowed to work. So I was trying to make my way into the music scene in New York without actually being allowed to work, which is a little bit tricky. But I took the time to really hone in on the traditions of jazz and cultivate relationships with different people. And I was very fortunate that right after I moved here, I applied to this very famous jazz competition. At the time, it was called the Thelonious Monk Jazz Competition. Now it's called the Herbie Hancock Jazz Competition. And I was chosen as one of the semifinalists. And my vocal mentor and professor at Manhattan School of Music, she had won it previously. So she kind of became a mentor for me throughout the process. And by going through the competition, I was offered a record deal with a record label called Ground Up Music. And they're the label of, I think now it's a 5-time Grammy Award winning band called Snarky Puppy. So I started working with them, and the band leader for Snarky Puppy produced my record. I got a chance to have all these really incredible, legendary, famous jazz musicians who had influenced me so much play on the record. And then as soon as I graduated and was allowed to work, I started touring with them, and it just really changed everything.
When you were in school, before your career started taking off, did you have high confidence in yourself that you would be able to land where you did?
No.
What were you hoping for at that time?
I mean, I that was the dream, of course, but having this Asian background of like, you need to be a doctor, you need to be a lawyer, and like it was definitely, I felt a lot of pressure that I needed to make it. And the odds are not, if I don't know what the statistics are, but like the statistics of being able to do original music and sustain yourself in New York City, they're pretty slim. So I hoped and dreamed for it, but I didn't I guess dare to believe that it was going to come true. And then one dream after another started coming true, and then I started to believe it more. So now I'm confident that I can do it, but it took me a really long time of many opportunities opening up and getting a lot of approval, like literally on my resume and CV of like, okay, you can do these things. Yeah. Was you becoming a semifinalist in that competition? Do you point to that as, if not the most important, certainly one of the most important credentials on the resume, moments in your musical trajectory? Definitely. And the doors that open from that.
And did you know before you became a semifinalist that if you got to that point, these doors would begin to open, or did that surprise you as well once it happened?
It didn't surprise me, but it wasn't expected. It was a very, very competitive competition. And since I did it in 2015, there hasn't been any for singers up until this year, 2026. So the competition is very competitive. They rotate instruments all the time. So, and there's also an age limit of 30. So in your lifetime as a jazz musician, the chances of you having an opportunity to even apply are very, very small. And then to become a semifinalist is a pretty big deal.
For someone who knows nothing about this world, which is pretty much me, put this competition in context as to like, is this the Olympics of the jazz world? Is this the Super Bowl? Like, I'm trying to think of what an analogy would be. I'm assuming this is like at least a national competition, if not a global competition.
It is an international competition. So I don't know what sports or like competition would be where, you know, you might only have one chance in your lifetime to apply. Can you think of any competition?
One time in your lifetime, no, but probably something like the Olympics, which is every 4 years.
Yeah.
So it's not yearly, but if you don't make it in one of those 4 years, you could conceivably make it again, but the odds are going down.
Yeah.
Probably. That would be my guess.
Probably.
I'd love to hear about how you got yourself in a position to even get that far at that point in your career. You know, I'm sure you must have been training every day for many, many, many years. It's always the work that goes into a moment like that people never see.
Mm-hmm.
I'd love to hear about what you think helped you or what worked to even put yourself in a position to get whatever, a bronze medal, whatever analogy we're going to use for this.
Yeah. I started playing violin and piano when I was 9, classically trained. When I became a teenager, I wanted to play jazz because I really loved the idea of identity and having your own artistic interpretation and having the freedom that jazz allows you to do, versus in the classical world, it's very much like, this is what the composer wanted you to do, and that's what you should do. And I just wanted to kind of break free of that. And I don't know if that's also going back to my like cultural upbringing of growing up in Thailand and not really fitting in, and then going to Sweden and not really fitting in, that it was so liberating to have a space where I could just do whatever I wanted and the way I wanted to do it. So that brought me into jazz. And I think just being around other instrumentalists and having an instrumentalist background of classical piano and violin, and I also started playing upright bass in high school. I just had more of this like instrumentalist brain, I think, than a lot of singers do. I also love emotions and storytelling and all those things that singers do, but what I really loved more was the bigger music language of all the possibilities, of all the different like harmonic options, different rhythmic options, think about music production, thinking about arrangement. So I would just spend endless amounts of times practicing. And I was hanging out with instrumentalists all the time, particularly this one guitar player who was my best friend. And I would ask how he would practice. And he would be like, oh, I'm just going to sit here and practice on my onset on this one guitar string. And then I would work on these chromatic lines on the guitar. And I would think that that is the way to practice. So I try to do all those things with my voice. And that was actually a time where I started to lose my voice, because I didn't understand that a singer cannot practice or use the voice for 8 hours a day in the same way as like a pianist or a guitar player, because it's just so much more physically demanding. So yeah, I think that it was like this long detour of trying to be an instrumentalist and doing a lot of untypical vocal things that opened up my ears to be able to navigate through jazz harmony and rhythmic structures, and to write my own music and arrange. And that helped me a lot in the competition.
Was there a point at which your father stopped harassing you about going into the artistic world?
Not really.
Still happens.
Yeah, he passed 2 years ago now. And I think, looking down from heaven, I think that he would be proud of what I've accomplished since he passed. I've just recorded and in the midst of finishing up a pop EP that's actually in honor of his memory.
Wow.
I got this commission to write some new music in last year, in 2025. And at first I had pitched that I wanted to write music about emotions and trying to understand it from a scientific perspective, because that's been my thing for the past few years of trying to translate science into music. But then as I started to dig into my father's passing and my childhood and all that, I just realized I can't. I can't really try to process emotions from a scientific perspective. So I allowed myself to write songs in the same way as I did that I was 12. And out came all these, I guess, pretty relatable pop songs. And that's what I've been recording now and finishing up. And I think that he would have actually really loved this music.
I bet. I assume he was at a point when he was here that he saw your career take off. Do you remember how he reacted to that?
I mean, he was happy for me, but he also didn't really understand it. I think that he thought that a lot of the things that I do are weird. And I mean, I agree. A lot of the things that I do are weird. But I think he was also very happy that I managed to find my own path and do something that brings me joy and manage to sustain myself doing that.
The all of the training you were talking about doing for at one point doing 8 hours of singing and losing your voice, when you look back at that time, I'm sure you're still doing a lot of training. Do you look at that as being like you needed to force yourself to do that work? Did you love the effort that was sort of it was internally motivated for you, that you just wanted to get better at this? How do you think about all the work you had to do to get to this point?
That's a great question. I think it was both. Like I loved when things clicked of like, oh, now I know what to do over this, part of the music, or, oh, now I can hear what they're talking about. I don't know how much if you're a foodie or if you like wine, but, having the ability to eat something and like, oh, I recognize that ingredient, or I'm drinking this wine, like, oh, yes, that is a fine Pinot Noir. I'm not a sommelier. I don't know enough about wine, but just kind of making that connection of being able to recognize what it is that you like, that really helped me motivate me forward. But then I also think that early on, it was pretty destructive motivation of trying to like prove myself that, if I chose to not be a doctor, it was for some kind of good reason. Yeah. And I needed to be not just be good emotionally with music, but I needed to try to be good on paper and somehow being able to navigate through some crazy jazz harmony helped me validate that. And now looking back, I would say that was destructive, but it was also part of the process.
Yeah, loving the moments, like the aha moments of growth, basically. Like it's a form of clarity, of understanding something you didn't understand before. Yeah. Which I think can become addictive in the best kind of way. So I'd love to walk through the steps of you making the semifinalists, and then do you get signed at that point and then a tour happens? I'd love to hear about just the logistics, the details of how a musician goes from student lover of performing to like, now you're a thing. Yeah. People are paying to come see you now.
It was a pretty overwhelming time. It was also pretty cool.
Yeah, I'm sure.
I just moved to New York, and then I managed to get into this really competitive competition. And I was studying with this mentor. Her name is Gretchen Parlato, who had won it before. And, in Sweden, the mentality is pretty much that there's a word in Swedish called lagom, which means not too much, not too little. And it's pretty funny because if you go to a Swedish grocery store, they have a thing called medium milk, where it's like the medium amount of fat. It's 1.5%, or no, maybe it's 0.5. But the point is that it's a 0.5% fat instead of just like zero fat or full fat. Like there's a medium. And that is the entire mentality of Swedish people. So you don't want to ever stick out. You don't want to do anything that's different. And for me to move to New York pissed so many people off, because they thought that I moved to New York meant that I thought that I was better than everyone else. But what I did was just follow what I loved. It had nothing to do with anyone else. So it felt kind of good to get this competition, study with this great person, get this deal, do these amazing things to kind of just, shush those people. We're feeling that way. But yeah, so I started recording my debut album, and I worked with the band leader Snarky Puppy. He produced it. He gathered all these world-class musicians to work with me. And then I got to tour with his band. So pretty much like going from being a nobody in Sweden, I came to New York, did all of this, and now I was performing for 3,000 to 5,000 people a night, playing with these incredible musicians. It was a pretty big shift in terms of like my life. And I'd never thought that it would happen like that.
Did you immediately feel like you belonged? Did you have imposter syndrome for a long time?
Yes. So much imposter syndrome. Insane imposter syndrome.
And nerves? I mean, were you also just extremely nervous or not necessarily?
Yes. Yeah. I had a lot of anxiety, performance anxiety, a lot of imposter syndrome. The band Snarky Puppy, they're also all men. So I was the only woman, and that is a common theme in the music world. It is changing, and there's more and more female instrumentalists, and more female instrumentalists are being on the scene and being exposed to a crowd, and people are seeing more female musicians, which is great because that's going to help even more female musicians, like young female musicians, grow up and be female musicians is by seeing that. But at the time it was just me. So it was me being this little female singer, and then all these hotshot guys who were over a decade older than me. So it was pretty crazy. But I learned a lot from that experience.
The cultural difference between the Swedish mentality and the American mentality, or just focusing, I've heard that so many times about just a European mentality of the tall poppy syndrome, of not wanting to stand out too much. It sounds like you feel like that's a real thing. You've actually experienced that. What tends to happen to people who, I can understand, I guess, culturally being resistant to arrogance, people who act like they're better than other people when they really aren't. But when someone is pursuing a dream and excellence in something, I can't really understand the idea of like trying to hold someone like that back. That seems almost ethically wrong.
Yeah.
What tends to happen to people who leave Scandinavia and do what you did? I think you alluded to this, but I'd love to hear about what happened, and I don't know how you approached that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that and you've also had Oscar before on here too. I think that we find community elsewhere where we're able to thrive being who we are.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of us don't really go back.
Because the haters are hating on you? I mean, is that a real thing? Is it more subtle than that?
It's not just because of that. It's also because of, I don't want to shit talk, because we're kind of shit talking, but it's the system right now is not really like the cultural landscape. It's also the same all over the world. Like there are definitely trends happening, but in Sweden, it's challenging being in the cultural sector, doing something that's different. So it's not just about the community of not having support from my previous colleagues and peers, but it's that there's not venues or places to perform or podcasts like this or radio stations who support the types of things that I do.
And did you, without naming names, like did you experience some shaming, like experience envy actively from people who, like, that was an overt reality for you?
Yes, I think that the clearest ways that I experienced that was just people not stopped showing up,
like shunning you or something, or you tell me.
Yeah,
like,
just not showing up, not wanting to be in communication anymore. And that's so sad because, like, for me, I love making friends. So once you're a friend for life. So it was very, very weird to suddenly, I thought I had all these friends and then I don't. Or some of those friends would get opportunities to be a booker somewhere or get different positions in power. And then they would just not want to give me opportunities in those spaces.
Do you find that the mentality is noticeably different here?
Yes. But I mean, in New York I think that what's different
That's
about
true.
New York is that it's so big that even if there's going to be all kinds of people here and there's cliques everywhere. But I think because it's bigger and there's so many cliques, people are less, I feel like generally in my experience, people seem to be less of gatekeepers here. And there's just more gatekeeping happening in Sweden because it's a smaller scene.
Yeah. So you go on tour with Snarky Puppies?
Snarky Puppy.
Snarky Puppy. I don't know how long ago that ended, but I'd love to hear about what else has happened subsequently.
Yeah. So I went on a few tours with them and then the pandemic happened. And during the pandemic, I just come off all these tours. So I was ready to work on my new record. So I had lined up some teaching work and music production work, and I was kind of prepared on having a year at home. But my husband, who is a drummer, he was supposed to have his biggest performing year that year. He had 200 shows on the books.
Wow.
So he just, in a blink of an eye, lost all of his work. And that was happening to a lot of my other friends as well. So I decided to start a festival, a virtual festival, along with a singer and composer, Tana Alexa, and saxophone player, Owen Broder. And so we got a virtual festival happening that started on April 1st, 2020.
Wow.
So Rolling Stones, like the magazine, called us the first jazz festival of the quarantine era or the pandemic era. I don't remember the exact quote, but they were doing that. And so we had a festival virtually for a week, and we managed to raise $140,000 to help New York musicians. So we did that in COVID. And then we did another festival again that summer in July. And then we did another one in collaboration with DC Jazz Festival to help them raise money as well. So that became like my COVID projects.
Yeah.
And I was commissioned to write my first film score. So I did 102 minutes of music for a silent movie. It was it was just a showing of the 1925 silent movie called The Lost World, which was the first movie that had claymation and inspired like King Kong and Jurassic Park and all these movies. So it was a movie from 1920s with dinosaur claymation. So I wrote 102 minutes of music, programmed it all myself, and that was premiered in Alamo Draft House. There was like 20 of them showing all over the US with that. And then I recorded a record based on the causes and effects of climate change. And that was my first time of trying to translate scientific concepts into music. So growing up, I'd always cared about the environment. I've always cared about the science and social justice issues. But I had gotten feedback from audiences that they felt like I was preaching, and they just wanted music to be music. So I was thinking a lot about how can I touch on these topics that I really care about in a way where people don't feel that way. So I got this idea of what if I don't put these topics into lyrics? What if I find ways of building them into the songs? So I took data from NASA's website about the rising global temperatures and translated that data into pitches to bring awareness to the global temperature. And then I took plastic trash from my kitchen and sampled it in a music software program and created a whole percussion beat out of it in order to bring awareness to plastic pollution. I translated birds mating dance, the rhythm of it, and use it as a foundation of a song to bring awareness to biodiversity. So I did a lot of those types of things, and that brought me down a path of going out on a research vessel in 2022 with 20 plankton scientists in the North Pacific. And my job on the research vessel was to write music based on their research. And that opened up a project that I'm working on right now. I just finished the final mixes of this album, where I worked in collaboration with plankton and fungi scientists, and I translated different scientific data sets and systems and behaviors into music, dance, and visual projections to draw connections between these microorganisms and humanity.
Damn.
That was a lot. Yeah, that was a lot. Sorry.
Well, you have a lot of balls in the air. It sounds like you have a lot of different projects going on. Are you still touring?
So I hope to start touring this fall, to do some kind of touring with my pop projects. And then the project I just mentioned to you, the interdisciplinary one, I hope to release that in the spring and do a little performing arts center tour with that one.
You said earlier in the conversation that you loved the freedom of the jazz system versus the classical system. And it sounds like you have taken that to heart in your career of just kind of dipping in and out of different worlds that become interesting where opportunities exist. I'd love to hear about how you think about what you are fundamentally. Maybe it's as simple as just a musician, a creator. How do you, not that you need to have a word, but like, how do you tend to think about what you're up to?
I mean, I think that the best word is artist.
Yeah.
Because to me, an artist is someone who expresses the human existence in an artistic way. And I think, if I just say an artist, then people are going to think about painter. So how can I distinguish myself from the preconceptions of what artist might mean to other people? So the different words that I have been toying with are research artists, in order to kind of push on that I have a more research and process driven practice. But then I also have the pop project where I actually ended up writing from my heart. So that doesn't really fit either. So I think that the best way to describe what I do is that I am a singer, composer, and producer who translates complex systems into accessible emotional experiences. I think that encapsulates everything that I do.
I like that.
Thank you. It was a little long though. It would be nice with just one word, but we don't have that yet.
You were also telling me about New Ink, right? I'd love to hear about that program that you're involved in.
Yes. So I have been chosen to be an incubator member at the New Museum in a program called New Ink, and I'm in a part of the creative science track. So all the artists that are in that track are artists who work in the intersection of art and science.
I'd love to give you a less serious question, which is, just as a citizen of this great city, what are the great artistic venues for you, musical venues? Where do you, if you have friends or family coming to visit you, or they're just looking for recommendations, where's a must-go-to spot in your mind?
I don't feel like it's so much about a spot, but it's about who's playing.
Of course, yeah. Good point.
But I mean, I'm always going to say that I love National Sawdust. Have you been there?
Of course, yeah. It's right around the corner.
Yeah. So I love that space, and I love a lot of the music that's there. But I mean, I would go to everything from Smalls, the Jazz Gallery, Village Vanguard, to Terminal 5, Madison Square Garden. It really depends on who's playing for me.
And who, if they're performing that night, are you clearing your calendar to try to go see?
Well, on Monday, I'm going to go to see Lady Gaga at Madison Square Garden.
Okay. I've heard of her.
Yeah. Yeah, my husband plays with Brian Newman, who's the trumpet player and singer, who is Lady Gaga's band leader for all of her jazz bands.
Wow.
So whenever she does jazz, it's with Brian.
Very cool. Any other musicians come to mind that you make it a point to go see? You know, New York musicians that you just think very highly of?
I love Tyshawn Sorey. He's a drummer and composer. There's also Vijay Iyer is a pianist. I'm going to give a shout out to one of my professors, Theo Bleckman. He's a wonderful vocalist. Obviously Snarky Puppy and the guys in that band. I've also toured and worked a lot with a band called Sungazer, and the band leader for that band is Sean Crowder and Adam Neely. And Adam Neely is an incredible bass player, and he also now plays in my projects. So, yeah, there's so many. It's impossible to pick. I feel like I've already I should list like 20 more people.
Yeah. I know the artistic life in New York for most of the people I've met over the last year is a often very difficult one, largely because of the finances and the demands of being on tour and working a lot, often working late hours. I always like to ask artists if they think it was worth it, if it has been worth it. I think your story is the exception to the rule in the sense that it sounds like from a pretty young age, you were getting amazing opportunities that may not have, paid like a high-end corporate job may have paid, but probably was enough to survive, certainly, and maybe even be comfortable here. I'd love to hear about that. And, you're still early in your career, but I'd love to hear about it if you think it's been worth it.
I think it's been worth it because I love what I do and I get to grow all the time. So in May, I'm going to this little island in between Seattle and British Columbia because I was commissioned by a scientist who got NSF funding, and she's studying jellyfish. So I'm going to go out and study these jellyfish with her in the water there, and then I'm going with her again to Hawaii in the fall to dive with her. And I'm getting these really awesome, super cool, well-paid opportunities to do this, and I think it's because I've just stuck to my guns of following what I love, and it's been taking a long time. I'm not Lady Gaga just turned 40 and she has sold out Madison Square Garden multiple times. So I don't have her type of career, her types of budgets, but I get to wake up every day doing what I love and I keep growing. And to me, that's the most important thing, that somehow I've managed to find ways to do that. Because I think that even some people I know who are on Broadway or even have some pop careers that maybe financially are more stable, they're not growing and they don't feel that they are doing what they want to do. So I feel lucky in that sense that I can still do what I love to do. And I find new things that I didn't know that I love to do. So that's, I feel very fortunate.
Outside of the talent and the hard work, what else do you attribute all these weird opportunities that have come your way that seem fascinating to you, that you get to not only do, but get paid for? I don't know if there's anything counterintuitive that might be worth talking about, whether it's just being, friendly to everybody you meet, if it's being living in a place like New York where there's just so much going on and you can meet so many new people. How do you make sense of how you've been able to create these opportunities? I'm
still working on this answer.
Yeah.
But
sometimes it's hard to know.
Yes, but I think because through this program at the new museum, I've really been forced to try to clarify what it is that I do so I can grow my business and trying to get investors and get brand partnerships and all these types of things. So it would be good for me to be able to clarify a little bit more. But I think that what I'm starting to find as the core of what I do is going back to that idea that I have the ability to translate complex systems and turn them into accessible emotional experiences. And I think that comes from growing up in Thailand and being Thai and being Swedish. So I from birth, I spoke Thai with my dad, Swedish with my mom, and then English together. And going to Thai school, I didn't feel like I was Thai enough because I don't look completely Thai. And I had this really tall, blonde Swedish mom versus everyone else's parents were short and Asian. And then I will go to Sweden, and then with my name, then everyone was like, oh, you're Swedish? Wow, you don't look Swedish. Wow, you speak so great Swedish, and all these types of things. So I think that my entire life has been about trying to find commonalities between different cultures and to find ways of translating, of bridging. And that is showing up in my art. And I think that that's been the thing that is allowing me to live across all these worlds, because I managed to find the threads that connect us.
And probably touching on something deeply human that is cross-cultural.
Yeah.
I always like to close these conversations by asking how artists think about the word success, which is sort of related to what we've already talked about. In you discussing or mentioning that you just get to wake up every day and be able to do what you love. When you think about that word, success, how do you make sense of that word? What does that mean to you in your career, in your life?
To me, success means having freedom. And for some people, having financial freedom is enough freedom. For some people, it might be, having no strings attached. Whatever freedom can mean to them, I think that is success. So freedom and happiness and purpose, I think, is success. And yeah.
Yeah. It sounds like you're on your way.
Yes.
Thank you so much for doing this.
Thank you so much for having me.